Okay, so it's Friday. We didn't do a video yesterday because we were too busy. Connor and Doug were streaming for most of the afternoon yesterday, and I was busy working on art and creative and graphic design stuff. This is a good example of like doing these game jams is really fun, but we also have like things that still need to be advanced. I spent most of the day yesterday working on the Don't Look Back layout, so I wasn't really able to record a video, so we missed a day.
Shame.
But we're here now.
Shame.
Connor and Doug got a ton of really good work done on the rule sets. I was able to finish a couple of pieces of key art yesterday, which was really fun. I'm having a lot of fun doing this. That's really cool. We got the painted minis back from Malev. I actually had sculpted the miniatures a little while ago, so it was really cool. He was able to paint those. I think he had fun painting them, and they look awesome. So we have a few painted mini examples. I'll be able to use those for photos for the final layout. Rules wise, I haven't really been able to do too much like writing. Connor and Doug have been handling the bulk of that the last couple of days. I did work on a few scenarios. I got a few of the like core scenarios fleshed out, and I've been kind of chatting with a lot of the writing partners that we work with, Matt, Malev, Corey. They're all going to be writing guest scenarios for that. So Matt has already finished his scenario, which is really cool. It's kind of like a boardwalk Empire boardwalk inspired one, so that's been really cool. So there's been some forward progress as the end of the week kind of rolled on. You know, you sort of got that like Friday malaise, I guess. It's been a little tricky because like there's still a lot to do, so we'll see where things are at on Monday. I'm hoping that I can get, fingers crossed, some sculpting done over the weekend for some more miniatures. That's my plan anyway. Monday, I think the three of us will probably get together and have a bit of a like project review and kind of start to like really hone some things in and cut stuff that isn't really working and make some of those hard design choices. So.
Alright, so Doug and I did quite a bit of streaming yesterday, and more or less went into it with this idea of let's play through a campaign of Midnight City. We had a lot of these concepts, we've worked out how combat works, we have these ideas of what campaign play would look like. Problem with the game design is when you have something based around a campaign and you need to play test it, you don't always have 6-7 hours to go through like a series of games, you know. If a game takes 30 minutes or an hour and you need to play 10 or 15 games for a campaign, that's a whole week's worth of playing. So we sat down, more or less did everything outside of actually play the scenarios. We built our crews, rolled on the table for our starting locations, decided that you should roll on the table for starting locations, bought our items, and when it came to time to play the scenarios, we would just roll off to see who won, 50-50 shot, pretty much, and then we would roll off for our secondary objectives. Then we would either get our rewards or not get our rewards based on our wins or losses, buy gear, and move forward. We feel really good about how it went. There was a series of things that came up, like starting locations, how the map play works, that once we were going through a campaign, got a much better handle on how we wanted it to perform in a game. I would say the main takeaways, one is we had these kind of generic maps based on neighborhoods of New York City. And this was a core concept in the game that we wanted to put in, but we didn't know exactly how it would influence or determine how you operated in a campaign. We decided that our list of locations need to be adhered to those neighborhoods based on what they are. So, you know, LaGuardia and JFK obviously would be the airport neighborhoods. You would roll to see where your crew started, and that there would be some bonuses for acquiring those territories. Core concept that we wanted from the very beginning, And I think that's a pretty clean way of implementing it into the game right now. I'm looking forward to playing a campaign and seeing how it works out. There's a few like bits and bobs, some secondary things like progression sheet. So at the end of a round, you would actually write down who won what, add it to your total. Some quality of life things that you wouldn't know until you were getting into it that we decided were worth pursuing. One system that came up that was not on our typical hit list was a loan shark system. This is to help prevent, as Doug would say, win more, or as I would say, snowballing. They win. Eventually they're so much better equipped that they outpace any other crews. The loan shark system would be similar to the corporate system in Lunar, but as we're using this to kind of explore our own deficiencies or mistakes as writers and get better, that system admittedly does have some drawbacks. We think that this loan shark system, we're paring it down quite a bit and getting it to a point where it'll hopefully allow the behind player to use it to catch up and not allow an ahead player to exploit it to stay ahead. And that is something that some Lunar players have done, and is something that we're looking to fix in the future. But it's nice with Midnight City to kind of take the same concept and rework it to a slightly different feel and different process for a player to use and see if it's successful or not and its intention. So much of game design is intention, and then you hand it to players and they just do something completely different than what you would intend for it to do. So many times while writing a game, if you think, well, why would anyone ever do that? That doesn't make sense. That people will definitely do that at that point. As we're writing in these systems, as we're borrowing from other games, other concepts, or introducing new things, we're keeping that thought in mind of, okay, now if we intend for this to be used as a catch-up mechanic, how do we specify that? Because just saying it's a catch-up mechanic doesn't mean that someone isn't going to try to exploit it. The campaign system, we decided to do 3, kind of taking inspiration from RTS video games, 3 different styles of campaign. Right now we're leaning towards a race. That is a race to a total amount of rep or cash. That's the win condition. Dominance, where you get to start with a ton of rep and cash, and it's a brawl for the city, as if you're 2 large organizations just going head to head instead of starting from the ground up. And Empire, which is entirely based on territory control, where you're trying to expand your empire. A few little things came up, like needing to specify and balance rewards for scenarios, specify the cost of vehicles, add a few items here or there that we thought would be cool. Overall, though, it went really well. The biggest, I think, not hurdle, but biggest thing that we hadn't considered was what happens if your leader dies. And it kind of came to light. There's like, with the 3 different writers, there's a few different schools of thought on the role of the leader in a game and the narrative of that. And it is, I think, somewhat of a lesson in like stating the objective and core idea of what the game represents, either narratively, what you're hoping to accomplish with it, as far as telling a story or providing an experience for the player. I always envisioned that my leader would be in the thick of it, that he would be right along with his henchmen in most cases. Doug, on the other hand, wanted his leader kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes. When it came to the actual table interaction of this concept of what happens if you're fielding your leader and he dies on the table, what happens if he gets removed from play and rolled, there was a lot of difference on how it should affect and the options available and things like that. It's one of the great things of a game jam, whenever you have a lot of different writers working on a single project. I don't think it's too many cooks in the kitchen, but it's more of you have a lot of cooks, and when you're creating a dish, there's always going to be preferences on how much salt or pepper it needs. In this case, it, I think, resolved in a pretty good middle ground that at its core has a lot of thematic and narrative elements that are pretty exciting. Currently, as the rules state, if your leader dies, you do the post-game as normal, where you find out he dies. You potentially can hire, with cash, more people And then after you hire, you must nominate another leader to come in that leader's stead. The big drawback is you will absorb the difference between the rep of a leader and whoever you're nominating to fulfill that role. The rep is based on each crew member. Leaders have a very high rep of 6. Muscle recruit grunts will have a rep of 1. If your leader dies and you nominate a grunt to the top, your crew's going to lose reputation. With that said, certain play styles that we wanted to allow, one of which is a kind of Zerg rush, as I would call it. It's where you have a lot of lower tiered but numerous henchmen, would not work with that system, because as soon as their leader dies, the crew would go to shambles, which is kind of cool thematically. If the theme gets in the way of the game, that's a negative. If you're making narrative choices that force players to play it in a certain way, but you provided the building blocks to play it in a different way, you have to reconcile that. Sometimes you say, yes, it doesn't make sense to do this, the game isn't designed for this, and while you can, it's going to be worse off. This game is very brutal, so the idea of a leader dying is very possible. If you field him, it doesn't take but 2 shots to down a lot of them. These guys are not John Wick. They're not meant to be riddled with holes like cheese. These are the sorts of concepts that, while we didn't anticipate, turns out we need to buckle down and figure it out. Because in a game like Midnight City, where you are a crew, you have a leader, you have henchmen, you have second-in-commands, the idea that there is leadership overturns, that leader dies, all of that's going to happen. Like I said, wasn't something we anticipated at the beginning, but because of our quick, dirty playthrough of a campaign, that topic came up. That makes it worth it. It's also a great lesson in the future to realize that if you're building a skirmish game with a hierarchy, that is something you need to keep in mind, both from a narrative aspect and a gameplay aspect from the very beginning, keeping some awareness on how these values all interact with each other. For the weekend, we have some cleanup to do, we have some little things to write in, we have some values to adjust, but going into next week, it's really at a place where we could get it in the layout and start really determining how substantial of a game and, as a result, potential product this is. Is this something that we end up just releasing for free? Is this something that, with all the time and effort and literally money, does it necessitate and does it deserve potentially a printed release of some sort? Does it deserve a paid digital release of some sort? We got to find out. But you can't find out until you start getting the product in your hands. We all have ideas of where it's going to go. We have goals of where it's going to go. But once it starts getting in the layout and you end up printing off a copy and holding it, you start realizing this is something I personally would pay for. If I wouldn't buy our products, why would we ever make them? Come next week, we'll find out if I would buy Midnight City. And then potentially we'll give you guys the option to do so as well.